Today I escaped from anxiety, or no, I discarded it, because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. We are watching a strategy unfold.
Market fit between a new technology and something that was incredibly valuable to institutions.
And how did those institutions take it in the early days? And how do they take it now?
Well, in the early days, this was more of a promise than something we could actually deliver. In other words, you know what I mean? Like we picked up on this as something that banks needed. And so we used a sort of 1-2 punch in our sales and in our communications with them. So first of all, you have to have something that someone needs today. No one's going to buy something purely for future need. Now, it's true, there were some banks that just want a press release. They just want we want to seem innovative. We want to seem like we have a blockchain strategy. And you could get a deal with them, then you do a press release and it would never go anywhere. And if you have nothing, that's better than nothing, right? Like if you say we sell software to banks and you have 0 banks, that's embarrassing. But if you want to actually grow a network, you need to solve someone's problem today so that they're motivated to go beyond the press release. They're motivated to build the system, integrate it, get it working, keep it live. So you have to have something.
MoneyGram is going to deliver the liquidity needed for the 300 plus banks that once used xCurrent.
You can deliver immediately. But also, when you're a young company that isn't ready to deliver everything that your technology can deliver, you also want to have that future promise. You also want to say, look, you guys have this very specific problem, and we have a vision for how we can build something over time that will solve that problem.
The 300 plus banks that belong to RippleNet have always had the strategy to use XRP at one point.
And actually the reason for that, right? So you think about regulatory and banking and licensing and all these challenges, and yet the world is like flooded with all these people that want to be in the cross-border remittance space. And my question is always like, why do you want to be in this space? But seriously, it's incredibly interesting because there is something magical about trying to unlock the world, and how do you literally get payments to move at real time.
The Ripple and MoneyGram partnership was never about consumers, it was about the banks.
Those pieces, and so companies like MoneyGram have a very unique position in the world. You know, we run a global net settlement engine that enables consumers to move money real time, but you know,
MoneyGram is a settlement engine, but not a bank. Ripple and the MoneyGram partnership was brilliant.
Money doesn't move real time. You can move data real time, but money won't move real time. And so how do you push that forward, and how do you think differently? And we have the advantage of being in 200 countries and territories all around the world. We see the individual needs of consumers, the individual needs of businesses, how commerce could be, how the world could be, but yet it's just not where it needs to be.
They're preparing a Swift 2.0 for the world to use, and its name is RippleNet.
It's their larger competitors that are like trying to prevent innovation, who want to push pause. And the amazing thing is, like, one of the criticisms that you'll hear about the XRP ledger is like, oh, it's a bank chain. It's built to be a bank chain. The paradoxical thing is, people think that a bank chain means centralized control, but that's not true. Because imagine if you're a bank, but you're not one of the top 10 banks in the world. And I go to you and I say, listen, Mr. Large mid-sized bank, you are not going to run the financial system. It's if banks are running the financial system, it's not going to be you. It's going to be the bigger banks. You have 2 choices. You can transact on a system that's run by your largest competitors, or you can transact on a system that's decentralized and nobody can control it. Your call.
When does all of this happen? When the too big to fail, fail.
Thank you for having me, Mike, and it's great to be amongst this panel. I think the question is where we fall is, we're a lot like our friends to the north in Canada, whereby we understand that there is a lot happening on the technology front that could aid the mission of the Federal Reserve. And also, we are learning from the rest of the world that problems can arise or challenges can arise that would need the Federal Reserve to respond potentially with new technology and potentially with a central bank digital currency. Like Canada, we have no plans to issue one. But we better be ready if one of those events emerge that we have seen in the world.
The debt crisis that we are in is a catalyst for CBDC. David was describing a consortia of smaller banks that set up a decentralized banking network called RippleNet. When the too big to fail, the central banks can pay directly to the smaller banks through the RippleNet networks. This is Deputy Director Timothy Lane from the Bank of Canada commenting on CBDC.
system. And so, we have research that's been showing up on our website, but we're actually now at a bit of an inflection point where we're moving from research to something that feels a lot more like contingency planning. From research to something that feels a lot more like contingency planning, because we're aware that the world can change very quickly. And although we don't think that Bitcoin is the money of the future, we think that it's got too many flaws in its design to be that. But at the same time,
The central banks developed this technology as Plan B. As Tim just said, it's contingency planning.
It has massive implications to the way that our global trade system works. And I would argue, and I think there's a lot of people that are crypto native, that CBDCs, central bank issued digital currency, will come to play much sooner than folks think. The US in that space specifically, there was traction and discussion around what a Fed coin might look like several years back. That traction failed as well, similar.
This is the FedCoin white paper by R3. In the FedCoin white paper, R3 mentions Ripple and XRP with their pre-allocation method.
To Canada. But as you start to see countries around the world moving aggressively in that way, I would argue that the pace is actually going to accelerate.
The COVID crisis has accelerated everything.
And there's focus. There was a paper that was put out by 2 IMF researchers over the last several weeks that was actually saying the U.S. from the CBDC perspective is so far behind other countries in the world that there may be an inclination or opportunity to look at how the U.S. could adopt privatized stable coins.
When push comes to shove, the US does not have this technology ready. They're going to have to adopt the digital dollar project, and within the digital dollar project, Ripple is involved.
You're not going to be the reserve currency of the world if you don't go in that direction.
Fully agree. Fully agree.
Yeah. These new innovative instruments. And one thing that would be extremely helpful in the currency area is if we actually had a central bank that would start issuing in the digital form. I know Canada thought about it. Canada thought about it for a while. They seem to have dropped that. China may actually be the first to.
China has a CBDC that is live. Remember that we are in a war. This is a technological Cold War. The United States will have to react. And the technology, they don't have it. They'll have to adopt it by the private sector.
It's a good question, but particularly if we're thinking about systems where, the banking system might not be perfect, no system is, but it's working relatively well, and there's, efficiencies are quite strong. I guess there's a couple of different considerations. One is really the competition aspect. So if you have a private sector player, and I think we all know who we're talking about here, who is going to come into the market with a very similar product anyway, I think you really need to be thinking about.
Remember, Ripple is not a threat. Ripple works with the system. She was talking about Libra.
Well, if it's going to happen, then maybe I, as a central bank, want to be setting the kind of the lay of the land in this, rather than letting having the private sector move into something which has such important implications for the capacity of governments to deploy traditional tools of monetary policy.
Remember that Ripple is working with regulators. This means that all central banks around the world Ripple is meeting with. Anytime you see a bank using Ripple software, they had to get approval from the central bank, especially with using a crypto asset.
That could require us to take action. And furthermore, our division in Boston, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, is exclusively a technology division. We are not policymakers. But I'm sure, like our friends in Canada, and our friends in the ECB, or our friends in China, there is a lot of levers we need to understand how to pull, and what happens when you pull 1, 2, or 3 levers. That's critical for us. And that's always also based on the problem.
As CBDCs move forward, the financial architecture needs to be updated. The laws need to be updated. Everything will be updated, and this will open the door for crypto assets to be utilized. Ripple has been working with regulators and put in their input. When it goes live, Ripple knows the ins and outs because it helped customize. When the debt implodes, Ripple has a network where you could settle. The Fed either sees this solution and is going to adopt it, or the banks are going to ditch the dollar. Floods will rob us of one thing, fire another. These are conditions of our existence which we cannot change. What we can do is adopt a noble spirit, such a spirit as befits a good person, so that we may bear up bravely under all that fortune sends us and brings us our will into tune with nature.